Good afternoon. Welcome to the Awakening Entrepreneurial Spirits program on small business. Today we will show the first program in a six-part series. The 1986 Newfoundland and Labrador Royal Commission Report on Employment and Unemployment states that promotional campaigns geared to bring the value of small business and successful entrepreneurs to the attention of the general public should be undertaken. Such programs would convey to the public the rewards of operating a small business and the contributions made by small businesses to the social and economic life of the province. These campaigns would also create a positive image of the entrepreneurs, helping to dispel negative stereotypes that have often become attached to the independent business operators. The campaigns would present entrepreneurship as a viable and socially acceptable career option. There is a growing awareness throughout Atlantic Canada that in order for the economy to grow and foster, the grassroots level must become involved in economic development activity. The local community has to be an active partner in all aspects of economic development, from promotion through to active involvement. The project, Awakening Entrepreneurial Spirit, emanated from the Pasadena Economic Development Committee, who believed that in order for the economy to improve, the small business sector had to be fostered and encouraged. An industrial incubator mall providing training, support, and development for small enterprises already existed in the town, and the Pasadena Economic Development Committee recognized that a public effort had to be made to inform people of the possibilities, prospects, and benefits of the development of small business. To encourage people to invest in local enterprises, an awareness campaign was required to give people a basic understanding of small business and how, through such local investing, we can establish a sound community-based economy. This awareness would be more effective if it was generated and developed at the local level. Funding for Awakening Entrepreneurial Spirit was provided under the Innovations Program of the Canadian Jobs Strategy. It was decided that local residents, business people, and resources would be utilized in order to create a more dynamic impact on residents of the area. 26 individuals were interviewed and their businesses profiled in a series of videos illustrating the concepts of why as opposed to how to enter the business world. During the interviews, the entrepreneurs talked candidly about their businesses in efforts to enhance other would-be entrepreneurs.
Well, about 26 years ago, I would think. We started to just grow flowers just for our own bit of fun of it, until some fella came here one evening asking if he could have some flowers to bring to his wife in the hospital. And that sort of set the seed. And from there on, we thought we'd go into the business, and it grew from there on.
Narration for the series was done by well-known Newfoundland actor Gordon Pinsent, who added a high-profile and dynamic thrust to the project.
Hello, I'm Gordon Pinsent, and I'm here to talk to you about small business. Specifically, I want to talk about small business here in the Humber Valley Bay of Islands area and its importance to the local economy.
After the videos were completed, a delivery strategy had to be chosen. It was decided that a live television broadcast by way of satellite would be the most effective medium to premiere the videos and broaden the project's efforts to stimulate economic growth in the area. On January 24th, an 11-hour broadcast was viewed not only in the Humber Valley Bay of Islands region and other areas of Newfoundland, but in most parts of Canada and the United States as well. Viewers had the opportunity to see the video series, live panel discussions on various aspects of small business, community profiles, local school concerts, and live entertainment. A toll-free telephone number and accommodations for a studio audience were provided, enabling viewers to call or drop in and see the event firsthand. Following the broadcast, the project centered on community animation. Presentations were delivered to high school students, community councils, and the general public in an effort to further awaken the entrepreneurial spirit. Good afternoon. I'm Charlie Callanan. My guest is Dr. Douglas House. Dr. Douglas House is the director of ICER, which is the Institute for Social and Economic Research at Memorial University, but he's also been the chairman of the Royal Commission on Employment and Unemployment, Newfoundland and Labrador, which report was released in 1986. So there's a few questions that we'd like to discuss this afternoon with you, Doug. And
Sure.
the first one that comes to my mind about entrepreneurs and about Newfoundland is that, I mean, I grew up in Newfoundland myself, and to me an entrepreneur was a fellow from Holland or from Belgium or from the States or somewhere like that. He came down with an idea that some people thought was a bit bizarre. After a while, they accepted him. He gave about 10 or 15 jobs out to people, and they thought he was wonderful kind of thing. And maybe after a while, he went away. But for some reason or another, we just can't see ourselves as Newfoundlanders, somehow or other, being entrepreneurs. So what I'm saying is somebody else seems to have to press the buttons for us. So what is there in the Newfoundland consciousness that makes us think this kind of way?
Well, I think there are a few things, Charlie. I think, first of all, if we look at it historically, in the way in which Newfoundland fishing villages traditionally operated, the great majority of the population never had the opportunity to become entrepreneurs or business people in any sense. They were fishermen and the wives of fishermen, and that was basically it. And you had perhaps one merchant family, or in some cases two. And as you say, quite often they were people still with connections with the old country, as you used to say, with the West Country in England. Big merchant houses in Devon and Cornwall and so on that would send out their representatives to Newfoundland. So the people that made all the business decisions, and some people would say the people that made all the money during a lot of our history, were these outsiders, or people with these contacts with outside. And they were sort of the linking point between the international market and the local fishing industry. So the great majority of local people, the Newfoundlanders, their lives circulated around fishing. I mean, you had to catch so much fish, and you had to sell it, and you had no control over the price, and you had to take what you were given, and you just hoped that you made enough to make ends meet. So in that kind of an environment, where economically it's very questionable, in terms of the climate and the ecology, I mean, it's a dangerous profession. And mainly you're very security conscious. I mean, basically you're trying to get by, you're trying to make a living. So the idea of kind of expanding your economic horizons and trying to do more than that, to go beyond that, there's just no place for that to develop in that kind of a situation. So that's a historical, I think, root of why it is that until very recently, at least, we haven't really thought about Newfoundlanders as entrepreneurs.
No, but the world around us changed, but we hung on to the old bias, and I think we still have it.
Well, the world changed in some ways. I suppose the big change for Newfoundland came in 1949 when we joined the Confederation with Canada. But then we had this situation where the leader of the new provincial government, Joey Smallwood, in his drive to become the leader and to get Confederation, kind of basically fell out with the local merchant class in St. John's. And I think it was when he came into power and was looking around for ways to develop the province, because he had bad relations with local business people, that he then started to turn to the outsider. You know, let's get an entrepreneur, as you said in your introduction. Let's get somebody, let's get John Doyle or John Shaheen or somebody from away to come in here to start the businesses, to get the enterprises going that are going to make this economy work. And I think really it's only in the last probably decade that we've really started to seriously reconsider that and to say, well, that is a strategy that may have some partial successes, but on the whole it certainly hasn't worked for the great majority of people in Newfoundland.
Now there's another thing too, Doug, and it's when somebody does decide to try something out or to venture, that's a good word, adventure something, he's sometimes knocked down by his community, people in his own community, and not really looked upon very, very positively by government either. So what about these surrounding forces now? I mean, you have a few lights being lit in a few places, and there are some people around them with water to pour on that. What's happening there?
Well, I mean, you're right. I mean, I can think of a really good example in a rural community that I'm familiar with, Trinity in Trinity Bay. And there was a woman down there who had a lot of the entrepreneurial spirit. And she started up a small store, and it was a wonderful store. It was one of these places where you could go and buy anything, you know, and the prices were competitive with what you get in St. John's. But the whole time that she ran that store, or shop as they called it, and was providing a real service to people in the community, nobody liked her. You know, and people were always talking, saying mean things about her behind her back. Eventually, she made enough money and closed it down, and then everybody realized how much they depended on her. And then they started complaining, of course, because she wasn't being an entrepreneur anymore. So I think, yes, you're right, and I think it still comes back to this kind of sort of egalitarian spirit that we've had that served us well in the early years in our history, and still people are wary about others sort of rising up out of the group to try to put on airs and get ahead and so on. So I think it is beginning to change, though, Charlie, but it's still there in a lot of places.
But see, I can see that in a community where there's a certain amount of jealousy, fear, things like that. But then also in your report, you mentioned not only is it in the communities, but like government, which is standing back looking at this, is not coming in and saying, boy, that's great, let's support this or support that.
Yeah,
and
I think...
What's the reason there?
I mean, I can remember probably about a decade ago, remember when the early oil and gas spirit sort of hit Newfoundland. Everybody's getting excited. And there were some local companies that invested a lot of money and initially looked as though they were going to be successful. And I remember one in particular, when it eventually failed and went bankrupt, talking to some officials within the provincial government who were almost laughing and were almost gleeful, you know, that this enterprise had failed. And I don't know exactly why. I think there is a difference in terms of the bureaucratic mentality and the entrepreneurial mentality. And really it's only perhaps in the last 3 or 4 years that people in government are beginning to realize when they look at the facts and figures about economic growth and what regions of North America have been successful, that you have to foster this entrepreneurial spirit, and you have to recognize that there are people who do take that kind of approach, which is different from your approach in government, but is nevertheless equally or perhaps even more important to the sort of long-term well-being of the society.
And I think, too, even when support is given, it's, say, by government, it's mostly given to the resource sector, say, and the manufacturing sector, not so much to the service sector, and yet the service sector says, so says your report, is the fastest growing one. Well, it would seem that that's a good place to put the...
Sure. Well, I've been doing some follow-up work in that area, and there's absolutely no doubt about it. I mean, and this is an international trend. It's not just Canada or not just North America. It's international, all Western countries, that the fastest growing sector of the economy is the service sector. In fact, the service sector is now, it includes so much that it's almost a misnomer. It includes everything from, you know, atomic physicists to janitors to people that, you know, serve in fast food outlets like McDonald's and so on. So it includes so many people in the modern economy that we really got to be thinking in terms of specifying the different industries within the service sector. And the trend seems to be that as technology improves, as automation increases, as management techniques improve, that we're now able to produce as many goods or more goods than we could before, but with far fewer people. So it's almost, I mean, the prediction is that it's going to be kind of like agriculture. You know, if you go back 100, 200 years, the great majority of people were working on the land in agriculture. Then the Industrial Revolution took people off the land and into industry, manufacturing industry. Now the next phase in historical progress is that people, more and more people, are not going to be involved in manufacturing. They're going to be involved in various kinds of information industries, really, of one kind or another. So I think you're right. I think that there's still a leg in our thinking, you know. And you'll talk to people now, even now, about sort of developing rural Newfoundland, and they'll say, well, we've got to do something more about the fisheries, or we've got to improve agriculture, or we've got to try to get small-scale manufacturing. And those things are all right as far as they go. But I think you're right that the great majority of jobs, if we are going to really have a significant impact, are going to be in various kinds of service industries.
It's funny, when you were talking about fast food outlets there a minute ago, I was thinking that a lot of these fast food outlets, again, are parachuted in from other places. But I was read over the summer in Atlantic Insight about a local chap who has real entrepreneur who started off with a French fry outfit called Ottawa Fries or something of that nature,
yeah.
I think, and which he's going to be franchising it and that kind of a thing. So that's something which
Yeah.
turns this around in a small way.
Sure.
Maybe an interesting case to,
And it can be done.
to talk,
there are some, there are some
look at,
examples of, I think there's one person who got involved in barbering, haircutting, sort of cheap haircuts.
Oh, yeah.
And that guy had started here, and he's now franchised into other parts of Atlantic Canada, and I believe outside of Atlantic Canada as well.
You spent, I guess, a good deal of time holding hearings during the commission pre-period. Spent a lot of time in rural Newfoundland. And one of the big, of course, elements was there was trying to track down the causes of unemployment. It seems to me that there's, in a lot of rural communities, people are trapped, in a sense, and can't get beyond themselves. There's such tremendous unemployment and whatnot.
Yeah.
I don't know how to ask you this question. It's so big. But what are some of the causes of unemployment in Newfoundland specifically?
Well, when you're talking, as you were there at the beginning, about rural Newfoundland in particular, and I think the situation is kind of different there than most urban parts of Newfoundland and elsewhere, you've now got a situation that's developed to the point where, for most people that live in rural Newfoundland, their basic family security really rests upon whether or not at least one, and hopefully two or even three members of the household can get enough paid employment during the year to qualify for unemployment insurance for the rest of the year. And that's just the basic fact of the matter, and it's rational for people to behave so as to provide security for themselves and their families. Now, the way in which the unemployment insurance system works, of course, is that it only applies to people who are employees. So you can't get unemployment insurance if, for example, you run a little craft store in the summer, right? Or if you start a little hotel business, or if you try to start some small-scale manufacturing thing going, try to get that going. So the situation is kind of weighted towards being an employee rather than an employer. If you got a choice between, say, getting 10 weeks' work in the corner store, getting paid as an employee, and then getting unemployment for the rest of the year, or trying to get a small business going, the risk is just so much greater in the latter case that you hardly even think about it, and for very sort of economically rational reasons in that situation.
Okay, there's a part in your report right on that. It says that when you went around and did your hearings, it says commissioners were disappointed during the public hearings to learn that few Newfoundlanders seemed aware of, informed about, and interested in self-employment. Young people in particular expressed interest only in working in the other man's army. You just said it in another way, didn't you? And often seem to feel that big corporations, local firms, or the government should provide them with jobs. Now, what is it that causes, well, I think you've just answered what causes young people to think like this. How do you begin to educate people out of this kind of thinking, knowing that there is a big risk involved, and you just really underlined it. That's an important factor. How do you brave the risk and go beyond it?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the key words, at least you mentioned there, and that is educate. And one of the things that has not been happening in this province, and it's just beginning now, people are just beginning to work on it, is that the entrepreneurial option just hasn't been taught to people. So, I mean, Harold Lundrigan, who is the vice chairman of the Royal Commission and is one of Newfoundland's leading businessmen, he was very interested in this, as you'd imagine. And I can remember going to public hearings, there'd be a group of young people there, and Harold would ask the question, he said, well, how many of you people are planning to go into business for yourselves? And there'd just be a silence, right? And he said, how many of you people have even ever considered going into business for yourselves? Same thing. How many of you young people have ever been exposed to the possibility of going into business for yourselves? Nobody in most places. So really what's happened is that, I mean, if you grow up in a situation where this option is never even suggested, you don't get any kind of exposure to it at all, then it's just a very, very unusual person that's going to somehow come across that idea for himself or herself. So certainly one of the areas in which change has to occur is in the school system itself. And I think it's that right now the Department of Education, with the Economic Council of Newfoundland, are beginning to work on some kind of a curriculum that would at least give that exposure.
You mean something's been started in this area?
Something is in the works, put it that way. Yeah, and certainly a lot more teachers in the province are aware of the problem and are trying to bring it informally, at least, into the school setting.
Yeah, I think, it's such an image thing when you come to think of it. If you say to a kid, what are you going to be when you grow up? He says, well, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to do this or do that.
Yeah.
And the tendency then is to say, ho, 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 or whatever, and to look down on the young person. For
well, of course, the other side of it, too, Charlie, is that at the time when governments were growing, when more and more people were being employed every year in the federal civil service and the provincial civil service, and when big industry was growing, so the big multinationals were hiring more people, more engineers and more scientists and more everything every year, then just to think about being an employee made a certain amount of sense. I mean, when I went to university, or probably when you did back in the 60s, it really didn't matter. You didn't have to worry about self-employment because there were lots of jobs around.
That's true.
That isn't true anymore, and is not going to be true in the foreseeable future. Most new jobs that are now created in North America are through small businesses. And in fact, in terms of the big corporations, they're now, as we said earlier, they're now producing as much or more, but with fewer people.
Well, maybe the big educational message to young people is, you've got to do it now for yourself. And that's the message. That was not our message.
No, it wasn't, absolutely.
Not at all.
No. And so it's quite understandable. There's always this sort of lag time, between recognizing the new reality and sort of building that into the school system and the training system that people go through.
Well, on that point, you mentioned the promotional campaigns, you're saying geared to bring the value of small businesses and successful entrepreneurs to the attention of the general public should be undertaken.
Mm-hmm.
Did you, when you were talking about this among yourselves and then that long period of time that you had, I guess, to get this report ready, did you come up with, could you picture in your mind what kind of campaigns they would be, or did you think how this might be done in any way?
Well, there's a number of different ways in which it could be done. I mean, you can use local. I mean, I like the idea of sort of using local associations. And I think what we're now involved in, actually, is one example of a group of people out in Pasadena, in the province of Newfoundland, who decided, yes, we're going to start promoting entrepreneurship and the idea of people getting involved in small business and becoming more self-reliant. So I think that's one way, to use these local organizations and to get them involved in the process of sort of educating people in their immediate regions. Another powerful tool, of course, would be the mass media, particularly television. And I think one of the things that we commissioners had in mind was that if the government really took this seriously, they could even begin a kind of almost like a generic advertising program, to support the idea of people getting more involved in small enterprise. It's not just necessarily in private business. It could be in community-type businesses, development corporations, or cooperatives, or whatever. The key term is enterprise, and that's the sort of thing that we wanted to promote.
I think the good thing about, to me, strong thing about Pasadena, and you mentioned the Venture Center, is the fact that it's a physical reality. I mean, it's not an idea. You can come and say, what's this place here for?
Yeah.
And I mean, it makes a statement just by structurally being there and having people there who will talk to you, counsel you, and whatnot, instead of just an abstraction, that kind of thing.
Well, that's true, and it's nice to have a sort of concrete thing as a symbol. But in most cases, in most parts of the province, in most parts of Atlantic Canada, it's not going to be that easy. You're not going to have too many of those kinds of enterprise centers. And so it's a matter of somehow trying to get the message across in a more general way.
Okay, on that more general kind of way, and you're talking about possibility of television and so on, do you know anywhere else where this is being promoted? Like, are there any parts of the United States where state of whatever, Utah, Arizona, whatever, is saying that they're going ahead with an educational thing about, did you look around, I mean, in your research in this kind of a thing to see what was being done in other parts of North America?
Well, in most
or is it they're so entrepreneurial there that they don't need to be pushed there? What is it?
It's partly true. In a place like New England, where they've had tremendous growth over the last decade, it's gone from being one of the poorer parts of the United States to one of the richest parts. And it's almost all come through this kind of entrepreneur, small business kind of dynamic. And the thing is, once it gets going, it builds on itself. This is one of the key points, I think. That once you get a few successful entrepreneurs in a region or a community, then you've got a positive example, for other people, and they follow up on it. But in terms of campaigns, I don't think there's been that much. There's been a certain amount in Great Britain, particularly in Scotland, where they have sort of been pushing this idea over the last few years, because they got the problem there of declining traditional industries like steel and shipbuilding in particular. So this has been something to kind of take its place in a way. Here we haven't got so much declining industries as stagnant old industries, that just can't provide a level of living at the contemporary standard of living for a great majority of people.
What about incentive money, Doug, to start going, seed money? Not a lot of that around, is there? I mean, in a venture kind of style capital, that kind of a thing in the province to date, is there? I mean, there's the Newfoundland Labrador Development Corporation, I guess, and they're working in rural areas, right?
Yeah, there are a number of programs. The Provincial Department of Rural Agriculture and Northern Development has quite a successful small business wing. The difficulty they've had over the last few years is that they've been very limited in the amount of funds that's been available to them. So they've had a successful program, got a lot of small businesses kind of underway, and then they've had way more applications than they've been able to handle. Now, I believe that there's negotiations going on for a new agreement, and part of it will be an attempt to increase what they have available, because they have a good system of delivering programs to rural areas. The other big new player in the game, of course, is the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency. And
ACOA.
ACOA is the
What is their
acronym,
policy vis-a-vis small business?
ACOA now has what they call the ACOA Action Program in place. And unlike their predecessor, DRY, they don't have a lower limit to the size of business ventures that they'll consider. So they're a lot more open and a lot more accessible to small businesses that want to try to become established or to grow than was the case previously. Now, it's a recent program, but I know there's a lot of interest in it, and they have begun now to support a number of different ventures in Newfoundland and the other Atlantic provinces. So I'm kind of optimistic, actually, Charlie, that there will be these sources, that the availability of funding for somebody with a really good idea and the drive to get it underway, I don't think is going to be a major barrier over the next 5 years at least. And it's more a matter of, it's one thing to have an idea. It's another thing to have the expertise to work that idea into a proper business plan, to look at the real marketing opportunities, because some things might sound like a good idea, but when you investigate them properly, you find out that they just can't work from one reason or another. You can't compete or whatever. So we need to get a lot more sophisticated, and that's one of the problems. Is that it's a matter of how you tie people with good ideas, particularly, again, in small, more isolated communities, how you tie them into the kind of expertise that they need to take that idea and develop a business plan, to look at the marketing, to make sure they have up-to-date technology. Because there's nothing worse than starting a new business and using outmoded technology. You're just not going to be able to compete in today's marketplace. So there's a lot of sophistication and, again, education that's required to be successful in small business.
A lot of people then are lost in the middle. Obviously, there's organizations that can help them.
Yeah.
They don't know how to get at them, or even that these organizations exist. And I think that you mentioned somewhere, too, in the report about possible communications problem, I think it was. It says the communications of assistance programs, the communication, in other words, the getting the word across, of assistance programs to entrepreneurs needs to be improved.
Yeah.
There seems to me to be a kind of like an educational middle role in here, isn't there, where you take enthusiastic people, but they need some training and whatnot, and then you have sources that won't even know about them.
That's right.
And somebody else comes in the middle. I guess that's one of the things that the Venture Center is doing, but are there other agencies that are doing that kind of a thing, or could the university do something in this middle role, if you like?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the things that I've been really trying to push since the commission ended is the notion that that Memorial University in this province should be playing a bigger role than it has been playing in getting expertise out to people in the communities who need it. Now, what you have is you have a body of expertise in St. John's, you have people out in the rural communities. I'm thinking of a specific example now out in the Humber Valley area, where they're trying to get involved in agriculture. And they have certain technical problems that they don't know how to deal with. There are people in St. John's that do have the technical expertise, but there's no way for those two bodies to get together. So that expertise is not brought to bear on that problem, and it's not solved, and the enterprise fails, and you still have unemployment. You know, that's the problem. So about a year ago, I guess, the university did begin to make a move in this direction. It set up something, I think it was called, the nickname was ACORN, Applied Community-Oriented Research in Newfoundland, I think it was. And this now exists on the books, and there's a nice little brochure about it. But as far as I know, it really hasn't got off the ground properly.
What is the intent, though, of
the intent is that if you can identify a problem that a community group has, or a small enterprise in a small community has, those people could then tap into, you know, there'd be a liaison person at the university they could go to that person either directly or indirectly, or telephone, or use computer hookups or whatever it might be to get in contact. And that university person would then have the responsibility of identifying somebody within the university community, or even somebody in what we call the extended university community, somebody at the College of the Marine Institute, you know, or somebody at the Cabot Institute, or even somebody in private enterprise who has the expertise that's needed to deal with that local problem, and then to bring them together. So that's the idea of the thing. But unfortunately, as I say, so far it only exists on the books. Another thing that's happening in the province is that there are the beginning of new sort of regional organizations being formed, such as on the Great Northern Peninsula, the Great Northern Peninsula Development Corporation.
Development corporations, yes, I've heard, yeah, the one on the Northern Peninsula.
And they have, you know, because they're a lot bigger and they have more resources at their command than a development association or a single small municipality. They themselves are able to get access to, you know, better sources of expertise than has been the case in the past. So there's another way. The other thing that's happened recently is that CEIC, Employment Immigration Canada, has begun a program called Community Futures. I don't know if you're aware of that.
I know the name, but I'm not exactly sure what the policy or the intent is.
Well, Community Futures is a program under what they call a Canadian Job Strategy. And it's something that regions with high unemployment rates, unemployment problems in general, can apply to get funding. And then under Community Futures, there's a series of different programs. But they can start a business center, say, in the region. I'm familiar with the Bayvert Peninsula, where they have a Community Futures program now. And they're going to have a business development center actually up there on the peninsula, so that people that do have ideas can go to this business development center, get expert advice, you know, learn about where the sources of funding that they can tap into. They can sort of be helped during the initial stages to try to get their little business or whatever type it might be going. So I think there are some healthy signs that things are improving in that kind of way.
You mentioned also in the area of education our new and expanded system here in Newfoundland with our community colleges having just been formed and so on. One of the things that you mentioned in the report was that very often, and rather than go off the top of my head, I'll just take the exact words. It says, unemployment can be seen as a byproduct of post-secondary educational institutions who are not in tune with the needs of the marketplace and contribute an imbalance between the supply of skills and the requirements of the marketplace. Now, do you think that, you know, with all the changes that have taken place, that there'll be a bit of a turnaround, or hopefully a great turnaround in this, or more of the same?
Well,
what I'm talking about is really educating people for a world that they're not going to go into. Or is this changing?
Before we turn to this community college system, perhaps a little background for viewers, Newfoundland had a system of what they called regional vocational schools. And back in the 60s, when there was a big construction boom and industry was growing, you needed lots of plumbers and lots of carpenters and lots of machinists and lots of people with these kinds of trades. And what's happened is, since that goods producing and construction boom has ended, we're still producing, we continue to produce people with those kinds of skills. And of course they couldn't find employment in Newfoundland. So they either became part of the unemployment situation here, or else they moved away to the mainland somewhere. And often the job opportunities weren't that great in certain parts of the mainland as well. So in fact, the single occupational category, which has by far the highest rate of unemployment, is in the construction trades. So again, you get this leg between what's happening in the economy and what's happening in the training system. So when the government decided to set up a system of regional community colleges, it was the beginnings of trying to get away from that. So these community colleges would be wider in their scope, and they'd start training people for modern occupations as well as these more traditional occupations. It was just gotten underway in the last couple of years. It's a serious problem of underfunding, and it's a little bit early in the game to say how successful they're likely to be so far. Yeah.
So in line with what you were saying earlier, what we should be doing is educating more people for an information kind of society. Brand new concepts, really, here, I guess, in this province.
It's new for this province. I think, unfortunately, as so often happens, other people have been thinking about this before we have, and we're playing catch-up again. But yes, you're right, and one of the interesting side effects of this, for example, is that most of these traditional industries where employment opportunities are less than they used to be are male-dominated ones. You know, people that are miners or construction workers or even fishermen and so on are for the most part have been male. A lot of the new opportunities in service sector employment are ones that females become involved in. If you're talking about people working in library science or word processing or these kinds of areas. So one of the reasons that there has been an increase, and quite a striking increase, in female employment over the last decade, but a kind of leveling off of male employment, is the way in which people are sort of oriented towards these kinds of occupations. So I think to some extent we've got to, there's been a lot of talk of getting women into what have been traditionally male jobs. I think there's also got to be some talk on the other side of the coin, that a lot more males have got to be thinking about information type jobs if they're going to find employment in the future.
In a lot of this new society, the information age and whatnot, what is this going to mean for rural Newfoundland? Does that mean that people have to physically leave rural Newfoundland to get into the information business? Or can we in the future have so that the way that information is processed and whatnot, it doesn't matter where one is? I wonder, what I'm saying is, will the information age be good for rural Newfoundland in ways in which we can't now see?
Yeah. Well,
because you don't have to be in any given place to process information,
that's right.
as you know.
My answer to that is that the information age potentially can be good for rural Newfoundland if we can gear up our policies and our programs to take advantage of the possibilities. But certainly, you're right. I mean, you can be hooked into all the latest technology, and you can have your video cassette recorders, and you can have your home personal computers. You can be completely up to date, with the most sophisticated kind of, say, marketing information if you're a fisherman, or technological information if you're about to try to start a new book printing business or something like that, no matter where you live on the globe these days. And one of the areas that a lot of consideration needs to be given to over the next few years is how to best make sure that that's done in small communities in Newfoundland and Labrador and other parts of Atlantic Canada. So I think one of the things that ACOA and also provincial agencies should be working on right now very seriously is this question of communications. How do we set up a communication system in the province and in the Atlantic region to ensure that everybody has equal opportunity to get access to information?
Well, I think in some ways that's happening in a parallel fashion with cable television and that sort of a thing. I mean, the world is everywhere now in a certain sense.
Well, I was really
you guys don't say anymore, "Oh, I don't know about this."
That's right.
You don't hear that anymore.
Yeah. Well, I was really struck when we traveled around. We went to a few small communities, and we saw a little sign saying such and such crafts, in a little tiny place. And we went into this craft store, and there was one little shelf of crafts, And then the whole rest of the shop was filled with video cassettes. You know, I mean, all the latest home movies are just as available in Ship Cove and the Great Northern Peninsula now as they are in St. John's. And I think that's a great thing. And I think that should be encouraged. And I think it can be taken further. And it does mean that you can now live anywhere in Newfoundland and be just as much a part of the modern age as if you live in Montreal or Toronto.
That's why I'm interested also in rural schools and how they will deal with this attitudinal thing.
Yeah.
We talked earlier about entrepreneurship and so on. And, you know, you said some things are being done. It's not in place yet. But what can we, I mean, what can we expect? I'm just wondering how this is going to be inculcated into the curriculum, or how it's going to work. Like, you know, I can't conceive of a course on entrepreneurial skills or something like that. Maybe there would be in high school. How would you do this?
Well, yes.
Or is this just having your local businessman come in and say, I have a wonderful life, I was very successful, I started with nothing, that kind of thing. You know, how do you do it?
I think that some positive examples can be quite helpful. But sure, there are a number of examples now of curriculum that have been developed geared to high school students, or in some cases junior high school students, not just to talk about business and how to be an entrepreneur, but to teach people about the economy, you know, about what it's like to try to make a living in this day and age. I mean, most of us are pretty naive when we finish high school. I know I was. I didn't know how to balance my own bank book, let alone run a business, right? And they should be able to. I mean, you should teach people how to be sensible as consumers. Teach people about the different kinds of options. You know, what's the role of a labor union in a modern society? What's the difference between a cooperative enterprise and a private enterprise? All these kinds of things should be taught to people in school. I mean, there's no reason why we should be learning ancient Greek and not learning about what's going on all around us in our society.
Yeah, I think there's an imbalance towards the intellectual and the historic and the classical, which I think is fine, as opposed to the civic and the practical and the immediate kind of thing. But like you say, I think that anybody who lacks either one is seriously lacking.
Well, yeah, I mean, I certainly...
It's not an either-or, I don't think.
I always have this danger of you know, my own academic colleagues leaping at me and saying, well, you're just trying to teach people to be technocrats, you know, and that's not the point. The point is that to be a well-rounded, educated person, as well as knowing different languages and knowing mathematics and knowing history, and you've also got to know how to get along in a rational way in your own society. So it's all part of education.
You have to understand how systems work as well, and that's something that's not taught as such, or has not been up to this time.
No.
If you had, if you were all powerful in Newfoundland and could do anything you wanted to promote small business and to help entrepreneurs, what would you do?
Gosh, there's a lot of things that I would do. I mean,
obviously you recommended a lot of them in your report.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I guess that we haven't really touched on, and that's really important, particularly again in rural Newfoundland, is that we have to make some kinds of changes in the way the income security system operates. Because as I explained earlier, when you create an environment in which the only thing that makes sense in terms of straightforward economic rationality is to find a job for 10 weeks to secure your family for the rest of the year, then that immediately works against entrepreneurship and the development of an entrepreneurial spirit. So I think we need an income support system that rewards people for working, that rewards people for taking a chance and taking a risk and getting going in a small enterprise. So that's certainly one of the very first priorities, I think. The education things we've talked about, which is also important. I think supporting these initiatives, and there are some of them now in the province, where there are some groups of locally based people who are attempting, who are recognizing themselves the kinds of needs that there are in their area. They're trying to get things going, like development corporations and like community futures committees and the growth of some of the development associations and so on. I think that sort of thing needs to be encouraged, needs to be supported by government. And we still have in Newfoundland, I think, too much of a kind of an urban industrial bias to our way of thinking. You know, if you go into the Confederation building and talk to people, they might pay lip service to rural development, but I don't think down in their heart of hearts too many of them still really believe it and are really committed to it. And I think that we have to have that kind of attitudinal shift as being a really fundamental part of the sort of change that we need.
I see I know what you mean by that, and I'm just wondering how you really just change people's thinking about the potential of rural Newfoundland.
Yeah, well, you don't do anything automatically and suddenly and overnight. I mean, one clear reason is that the other things hadn't worked. And in some respects, I think the latest announcement on Hibernia development, welcome though it may be, is in some ways a little bit, could take us off on the wrong track again. Because it's very uncertain. We may never develop Hibernia.
As some people say, this is the second coming of oil.
Well, okay.
Without the first one.
Right. But certainly
So,
over the next 10 years, it's not going to solve our unemployment problem. But if we focus on that and we just think about what are, we're going to build these big platforms and we're going to, do other things on a grand scale related to the oil industry, then once again, the possibilities of small scale, cumulative, but nevertheless very positive in the long term development possibilities are going to be lost. And I think we've got to be paying a lot more attention to a whole lot of small possibilities in this province. And that's just as true today as it was 3 months ago before the Hibernia announcement.
Well, I think that we've got to talk small business. We've got to keep talking small business and talking up small business.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we've been doing, and that's what these programs are intended to do. And I want to thank you, Dr. Doug House, for being here and sharing your experience. You've been really close to a lot of things in Newfoundland because of your position you've been in with the Commission for the last few years, and I want to thank you for sharing that with our viewers.
My pleasure. Thank you.
To conclude our program, we would like to show you a facility in Pasadena that has been built to foster, encourage, and assist entrepreneurs who wish to develop a business on the west coast of Newfoundland.
The town of Pasadena is located in the Humber Valley region of Newfoundland and is the home of the province's first industrial incubator mall. The whole concept of incubators originated in the UK, where similar facilities were developed to help offset huge layoffs at large corporations. The concept is to provide support for entrepreneurs in getting their ideas into commercialization and surviving the initial startup years. This support is provided in a number of ways, including low rental accommodation, access to common office services, and support staff who provide business expertise. With the establishment of the Venture Center, Pasadena is rapidly becoming a focal point for budding entrepreneurs. It's centrally located in a region of nearly 60,000 people, with several larger industries, including a pulp and paper mill in Corner Brook. Pasadena is just 20 kilometers away from an airport, has direct links to the Trans-Canada Highway and the railway, and has plenty of easily developed land. The layout of the building is designed to house two types of businesses, manufacturing and processing. There are 12 units, each completely separate from the others, with a common office core. The office provides space for administration and can offer a number of services to the entrepreneur that would ordinarily be expensive to operate. These include secretarial help, photocopying, telex service, telephone answering, and a range of computer services. The capital costs associated with starting a business are a major hurdle, but can be overcome through the low rental rates offered by the incubator. The Venture Center has established a business advisory committee that provides guidance and support to entrepreneurs in the development of their business plan, in attaining adequate financing, and in making sure the business stays on a solid footing. As well, the Center has developed communication links with a variety of agencies worldwide for up-to-date information and support. Combined, all these resources provide a level of expertise and guidance not normally available to individuals wishing to start a business. The Venture Center also organizes business forums, bringing together people who have expressed an interest in being in business. They are introduced to some unique products that can be manufactured locally or to new developments which can provide a prospect for a local entrepreneur. Follow-up training is given to focus on support agencies, government programs, and private sources of funding. The benefits the Venture Center has provided to the region so far include employment opportunities, increased tax revenue, and enhanced exposure to the small business sector. Newfoundland Polybag operates in one entire wing of the Venture Center and manufactures polyethylene film and bags. It employs over 20 people. Viking Stone, the first tenant, manufactures artificial stone products for home and building decoration. The newest tenant, Provincial Blind Manufacturing Limited, is in the business of making all types of window blinds for residential and commercial use. It is well established in the business world that a new enterprise takes approximately 5 to 6 years to reach maturity. The long-term success of a project depends on careful management and solid planning with expert advice. The Venture Center and other incubator malls can help guide a prospective entrepreneur through those initial years with incentive and encouragement, as well as practical support through low-cost rentals and shared services. There are many challenges for a business person, and by using incubators as a tool and catalyst, success will undoubtedly be enhanced.
That concludes today's programming. In future shows, we'll explore topics such as investment, the illusions and realities of government agencies, business opportunities, and the characteristics of a business person. Next week, our program will revolve around education, formal versus non-formal. Thank you for watching.